Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I wanted to give you a field report on on Marvel Multiverse role-playing game Session 2. So I started with a one-shot. I just invited people to play, and I was incredibly blessed. The players were like, "This is what I want to do next in this campaign." So it was really nice, and we moved on to Session 2. Now, the first session, only three of the players, no, four of the players returned. But one of the things that we're realizing is Marvel Multiverse role-playing game is different than Dungeons & Dragons in that you can create your own custom hero, but you don't have to. There's 100 heroes there's 100 characters in the book. And that's the big question is there's those, and this is really fascinating because I'm starting to understand Marvel Multiverse and Marvel Multiverse RPG. And what's really interesting is this game does not differentiate between player characters and non-player characters. It just stats everything as a player character, right? And what's interesting is with those 100 characters in the book, you can absolutely represent anything on the Marvel side, and frankly, you can represent anything on the DC side. You don't, none of them are statted, but you could do it, right? And so it's extremely, I'm really loving the whole milieu. It is really exciting, and I really like it. So but something happened between Session 1 and Session 2. We went from a hero game to a villain game. How did that happen? Well, first of all, I said in the first, I insisted everybody run heroes in the first game. Immediately, one of the players was like, "I'd like to play Carnage." And I was like, did you hear the words I said? And he was like, and hey, people get the right to ask. And I was like, you can, and actually, I did, this is kind of on me. I told them, you could play a villain, but we have to goodify them. And so what we did was, we soul swapped Carnage with a good NYC detective, right? But it was Carnage's power and the Carnage symbiote, right? So, but the character was played for good. So we already had one villain, air quotes, in the game, right? Between Session 1 and Session 2, one of my other players completely custom made a character and created a high-tech android created by AIM, which is Baron von Strucker. I got another villain here, right? Now the player is like, "Hey, I'm gonna aim this character toward good," and I'm like, that thing's built as a villain, right? You were literally created by Baron von Strucker. This is a villain, right? Then I reached out to another player, and then I let everybody know, "Hey, we're running Session 2. You guys can show if you have time, if you're free." And this is how I run all my D&D now, right? I don't do, "Hey, you want to play D&D? Well, what's that mean?" "Well, you're going to come to my house once a week forever. There's no ending to it." I don't do that anymore. I'm like, "Hey, game's happening at this time, right? If you're free, show up, and we're gonna run, right?" And I'm very surprised how well it's working, and I feel really comfortable because I feel like everybody who's at the table really wants to be at the table, which is great, and so I'm really excited about that. And so we went. So then I reached out to my third player, and I'm like, "Hey, we're running," and the person's like, "Hey, can I play Thanos?" And I was like, "Dude, you played Hulk in the last game, right?" But now I got 3 players wanting to play villains, and I'm like, you know what? I can't. I gotta listen to my players, right? And my players clearly want to run villains, and so I'm like, okay, listen, we're gonna show up on Thursday night. We have a Thursday night gaming group, and I'm like, "Hey, everybody's running villains," and they're like, wait, we were all had these villains that were going to be good, and I'm like, everybody wants to run villains. Let's just run, you guys run villains. I'll run the heroes against you, right? And I was like, this isn't my first pick. I'm a little alarmed by the whole thing, and I really wish you guys were picking villains. But I also don't want to not listen to you. If you're asking to run villains, you guys want to run villains, right? So let's do it, right? And so I did not know this would work. I was a little concerned, and I was like, okay, let's jump into this. Let's see what happens, right? So we did. We jumped into it, and we saw what happened, and here's what happened. Here was the table. It was, so 4 of my players from session 1 returned, okay? The guy who played Hulk now played Thanos, okay? The guy who played Carnage, right? The guy who played Wolverine in the last session played a brand new high-tech android made by AIM, Baron von Strucker, and now he had this AIM agent, right? And he has the ability to absorb powers. Okay, so that's what his character can do. Okay, and then so let's go. Oh yeah, the person who played Storm took Gore the God Butcher. Okay, and then which I just learned this. Gore the God Butcher is powerless without Gore the God Butcher's sword. Right, so that was very interesting. I didn't really understand that. And then we had a new mixed gender table. We had a female player, a woman who played with us. New player, I never seen her before at the table, but she was invited by one of my players, and we had a mixed gender table, which I am extremely excited that my tables are starting to be more routinely mixed gendered, right? So, and I want to say, actually, I was really excited because honestly, the reality is, often the tables that I will run are primarily men. It's dominated by men. It's not equal amounts, right? And you guys know, and we're running in an FLGS, and this is absolutely a historical issue within Dungeons & Dragons. And to this day, there has never been a report anywhere that the number of females playing Dungeons & Dragons outweighs the number of males. And there have been multiple reports that is not the case. Wizards of the Coast last update was 60-40, right? So, male, right? So, I'm a little, whenever a woman joins the table, I'm a little concerned that I'm very aware of, if you're a man and a woman joins the table, you need to make sure that she is welcome, because there's a history with Dungeons & Dragons of female players, not women, trying to change my language there, with women players not being welcome at the table, right? That's a historical fact. Like, it's definitely been an issue, right? So I want to make sure that, and I'm aware of that, but not all my players, they're like, I don't know about that, right? So like, not all of them are aware of all that history and all, the amount of care that needs to be put into this stuff. And, none of them are ignorant, none of them are rude in any way, but not all of them are like, hey, I'm trying to fix a cultural, problem, right? Like, not, so I'm always concerned, right? But I also want to have a welcoming table, right? And it was great. There were no problems. Every single one of my players was extremely welcoming, very kind, very tolerant, no issues whatsoever, which I was really excited to see, and I was very proud of everybody at the table. And we had a mixed gender table, and there were no issues, which is fantastic. Well, more than no issues. I think everybody really enjoyed the game, which is really fantastic. So, went from heroes to villains. I gave you an update on and the female, and actually this is kind of nice. The woman player played Green Goblin, Norman Osborn. So there was some, that was kind of interesting. Not only was it mixed gender, but some of the players, you had a woman playing a male character, which I think that's kind of cool. It's one of the things that Gary established in Dungeons & Dragons that's been carried forward in. I don't think there's a single game that doesn't allow gender swaps. So it was. I just wanted to give you guys a heads up of what I've been spending my time on. I am so excited about Marvel Multiverse RPG. true inheritor of everything cool from Dungeons and Dragons, is doing a great job. And we went from a hero game to a villain game, and it went smooth as silk. It was very cool. It was a little surprising at times, but I really think everybody had to enjoy themselves, and we're ready to roll into session 3. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Do you have any advice for how I should run session 3? Do you guys have advice on running villain games? I'd love to hear it. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider like, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.